Honda just mass canceled its entire electric vehicle lineup. The Zero Saloon, the Zero SUV, and the Acura RSX. All dead. Every single one of them gone before a single customer ever sat behind the wheel. And here is the part that should make your jaw hit the floor. Honda is now staring down up to $15.7 billion in total losses from this decision. Their first operating loss since 1957. But how did this happen? How did one of the most respected automakers on the planet go from promising to blow up the entire EV market to blowing up their own balance sheet in just 14 months? It all started in Las Vegas. January 2025, the CES show floor at the Convention Center West Hall. Honda rolls out two of the most aggressive electric vehicle prototypes any Japanese automaker has ever built: the Honda Zero Saloon and the Honda Zero SUV. Katsushi Inoue, Honda's senior managing executive officer, takes the stage and tells the crowd they are looking at the prototype of the new flagship model, the Honda Zero Saloon, and that Honda is very excited to bring this model to market in 2026. Then he points to the SUV and practically shouts that the Zero SUV will be built and launched globally starting right here in North America in the first half of next year. The crowd goes nuts. The automotive press loses its mind. And honestly, looking at the specs, you could see why. 800-volt architecture, 300-plus miles of EPA-rated range, DC fast, charging from 15 to 80% in 10 to 15 minutes. Up to 482 horsepower from a dual-motor setup. A brand new Osmo operating system, named after Honda's famous robot, built on a custom 3-nanometer chip, co-developed with Renesas that promise 2,000 TOPS of AI performance. Level 3 autonomous driving, meaning eyes off the road. A new Honda logo, their first redesign since 1981. And the Saloon stood less than 1.4 meters tall, about 4 centimeters shorter than a Tesla Model 3. Honda's CEO, Toshihiro Mibe, had been calling it the anti-Tesla approach. Where Tesla and Rivian and Lucid built their EVs thick and heavy, Honda was going thin, light, and wise. Those were his exact words from CES 2024. We will create completely new value from zero. On paper, this looked like it could actually work. The Zero SUV's 300-plus mile target would have matched the 2025 Hyundai Ioniq 5 at 318 miles and $43,975. It would have beaten the Toyota BZ4X at 252 miles. The Saloon's 482 horsepower ceiling went right at the Tesla Model 3 performance, and Honda's 800-volt charging matched Hyundai and Kia's EG-MP platform, while absolutely smoking the Ford Mustang Mach-E's slower system. Honda was even promising level 3 autonomy that none of those competitors had cleared in the United States. This was supposed to be the moment Honda stopped being a follower and started leading. But what nobody at that CES keynote was talking about was the money Honda had already bet on this working, and the numbers were staggering. In April 2022, Honda committed 5 trillion yen, roughly $40 billion, to electrification over 10 years. Then in May 2024, Mibe doubled it, 10 trillion yen. That is $64 billion through fiscal 2031. The plan called for 7 Honda Zero Series models globally by 2030, 2 million EVs sold annually, and 100% electric and fuel cell vehicles by 2040. Honda was not dipping its toes in. Honda was cannonballing into the deep end. And they were building the infrastructure to match. A $4.4 billion battery joint venture with LG Energy Solution in Jeffersonville, Ohio. 40 gigawatt hours of annual capacity. 2,200 jobs. Over $1 billion retooling the Marysville and East Liberty assembly plants and the Anna engine plant to handle EV production on the same lines as gas cars. 220,000 vehicles a year capacity. A $15 billion Canadian EV value chain in Alliston, Ontario, supposed to build 240,000 EVs a year by 2028, with about $5 billion in combined government subsidies. And a 43 billion yen all-solid-state battery pilot line in Sakura City, Tochigi Prefecture, that started operations in January 2025. Honda's R&D president, Keiji Otsu, called it an innovative technology that will be a game changer in this EV era. That is a lot of concrete poured and a lot of checks written for a company that was about to pull the plug on the whole thing. But more on that in a minute, because while Honda was building factories and unveiling concepts, the rest of the EV industry was quietly drowning in red ink. And these numbers are the ones that tell you everything you need to know about why Honda's plan was doomed before the first Zero series ever rolled off a production line. Ford's EV division, Model E, lost $5.07 billion in 2024. In Q1 of 2024 alone, Ford lost roughly $132,000 on every single electric vehicle it sold. That is not a typo, by the way. $132,000 per car on 10,000 deliveries. Ford CEO Jim Farley said revenue is dropping faster than they could take out the cost, and Ford guided another $5 to $5.5 billion in Model E losses for 2025. GM's Mary Barra announced their EV portfolio became variable profit positive in Q4 2024. Sounds great, until you realize that analysts at BNP Paribas estimated GM still lost about $2.5 billion on roughly 189,000 EVs that year. Variable profit positive just means each individual car stopped losing money on parts and labor. It does not count the billions already spent on factories and tooling. Rivian lost $38,784 per vehicle in Q1 2024 and $32,705 in Q2. Lucid lost $341,164 per vehicle in Q3 2024. That is the kind of number that makes accountants cry. Stellantis, the company behind Jeep and Ram, booked $22.3 billion in net losses in 2025, with over $25 billion in EV-related charges. Their CEO, Antonio Filosa, said results reflect the cost of overestimating the pace of the energy transition. The Jeep Wagoneer S sold just 175 units in Q1 2026, down 93% year over year. Volkswagen killed the American-built ID.4 in April 2026. VW's brand CEO Thomas Schaefer called the ID.3 and ID.4 not true Volkswagens. Every single major automaker that went heavy into EVs was hemorrhaging cash, and Honda was about to walk right into that same buzzsaw. Then came the first crack. In December 2024, Honda and Nissan signed an agreement to explore merging into the world's third largest automaker. It was supposed to give both companies the scale to survive the EV transition. By February 13, 2025, the deal was dead. Honda wanted Nissan to become a wholly owned subsidiary. Nissan CEO Makoto Uchida said no. Mibe told reporters he was really disappointed that they proposed a one governance structure but were unable to come to an agreement. Christopher Richter at CLSA Tokyo said the news highlights that control was a contentious issue. Honda shares jumped 8%. Nissan dropped 4%. The merger that was supposed to save both companies from the EV storm just evaporated. Subscribe if you want to know which automaker falls apart next, because Honda is not the last one. Now, 3 months later, the Budget Axe came out. On May 13, 2025, Honda postponed the $15 billion Canadian Ontario plant by approximately 2 years. Spokesperson Ken Chiu blamed the recent slowdown of the EV market. A week later, on May 20th, Mibe slashed total EV and software investment from 10 trillion yen down to 7 trillion, a 3 trillion yen cut. That is $21 billion wiped off the plan. He abandoned the 30% EV target for 2030 and pivoted hard to hybrids, announcing 2.2 million hybrids out of 3.6 million total sales by 2030, and 13 next-generation hybrid models launching from 2027. Mibe said, "This is a switch in the planned course, but the long-term direction toward electrification remains unchanged. Honestly, that is like saying you are still going to the gym while canceling your membership." The direction might remain unchanged, but the car is definitely in reverse. And then came the demand collapse that sealed it. The $7,500 federal EV tax credit expired on September 30th, 2025. Buyers rushed in before the deadline. Q3 2025 hit a record 438,487 EV sales and 10.5% market share. Then, Q4 fell off a cliff. Market share dropped to 5.8%. EV inventory ballooned to 149 days by November, the highest since February 2024. Q1 2026, EV sales fell 27% year over year. Auto Pacific's Ed Kim said he was forecasting EV market share to dip to 7% in 2026, marking the very first expected annual drop in EV market share since 2011. On top of the dead tax credit, Trump's 25% Section 232 tariff on imported vehicles hit in April 2025, and on June 12, 2025, Trump signed a resolution revoking California's Advanced Clean Cars 2 waiver, killing the EV sales mandates that had been forcing automakers to build these cars in the first place. The regulatory floor that Honda's entire business case depended on just got yanked out from underneath them. March 12, 2026, Honda dropped the bomb. The Zero SUV canceled. The Zero Saloon canceled. The Acura RSX canceled. Not a single one of these vehicles would ever be built for sale. Restructuring charges of up to 2.5 trillion yen, roughly $15.7 billion. Honda revised its fiscal 2026 operating profit forecast from a positive 550 billion yen to a loss of 270 to 570 billion yen. Their first automotive operating loss in 69 years. Executives Maebe and Noria Kaihara forfeited 30% of their compensation for 3 months. Other executives gave back 20. Honda's official statement said they determined that starting production and sales of these 3 models in the current business environment, where the demand for EVs is declining significantly, would likely result in further losses over the long term. They specifically blamed the abolition of tax incentives, the easing of emissions regulations, and the imposition of import tariffs. Honda stock dropped roughly 8% in pre-market trading. 2 weeks later, Sony Honda Mobility canceled the Afeela 1 and a second unannounced model. By April 21, 2026, Sony, Honda, and their joint venture announced they would scale down operations and send employees back to their parent companies. The whole thing was dead. And if you are wondering how nobody saw this coming, the answer is that people did see it coming. They just ignored 30 years of evidence. Honda's EV history is basically a list of cars that got built, barely sold, and quietly killed. The Honda EV Plus in 1997. Lease only. 81-mile range, about 325 units total, most of them reclaimed and destroyed. The Honda Fit EV in 2013, capped at exactly 1,100 units. 82-mile range, lease only in 7 states. The Honda Clarity Electric in 2017, 89 miles of range, lease only in California and Oregon. The Honda E in 2020, sold roughly 1,800 units in Japan and about 10,000 in Europe before production ended in January 2024. Every single one of these was a compliance car, built to satisfy regulations, not customers. Even the Honda Prologue, their most successful EV, with over 33,000 units sold in 2024, was not actually Honda's car. It was a GM Ultium platform vehicle built at GM's plant in Mexico. And after the tax credit expired, Q1 2026, Prologue sales fell 65% year over year to just 3,319 units. Honda had to slash prices by $7,500 across the board just to move them off the lot. The Acura ZDX, same GM platform, ended production in September 2025 after just 18 months, and the $5 billion Honda GM Affordable EV partnership, announced in April 2022, got canceled in October 2023. Maebe told Bloomberg they decided it would be difficult as a business. That pattern. Launch a low-volume EV, Sell it in as few markets as possible, then cancel it when it fails. Has been Honda's only move in the EV space for 3 decades. Carl Brower, executive analyst at IC Cars, told the Detroit News that these 3 canceled Honda EVs point to a business model that does not make sense and was only going to be executed to satisfy regulatory requirements. Without those punishments coming from the government, it just does not make sense to produce those vehicles. He also said Honda was looking at Tesla thinking they could experience the same success, but all the data shows Tesla is its own creature, and if you think you can do what they are doing, you are wrong. Julie Booty, auto analyst at Pelham Smithers Associates, said the main surprise was that the U.S. production program was canceled rather than just scaled down. And Mac Hogan at Inside EVs wrote the most brutal takedown. He said the Zero Series was supposed to prove the doubters wrong, then Honda canceled it and proved them right. He called Honda the only major automaker in this market to have never built its own long-range EV. He said Honda is performing the only tactical maneuver it has mastered in the EV era, which is retreat. Look, I am not going to sit here and pretend I did not think the Zero Series looked promising when it was announced. It did. But looking at the receipts now, the $15.7 billion write-off, the first operating loss in 69 years, the dead Nissan merger, the postponed Canadian factory, the canceled Sony partnership, and a 30-year track record of killing every EV it has ever made, it is pretty clear what happened here. Honda did not blow up the EV market. The EV market blew up Honda. And the lesson is the one nobody in Detroit or Tokyo wanted to hear. When your entire EV business case depends on the government mandates and tax credits, instead of customers actually wanting to buy the car, one election cycle is all it takes to bring the whole thing crashing down. As of right now, Honda's only surviving Zero product is the Zero Alpha, a smaller SUV headed to Japan and India in 2027. Miebe himself said it is probably too small for the US market. A full strategy reset is expected in May 2026. This story is not over, not even close. Honda's full strategy reset drops in May 2026. And whatever they announce, I will be here with the numbers. Subscribe so you catch that breakdown the moment it goes live.